All right.
All right. Hello. We are here with Jen Rainin, the co-director of the documentary Ahead of the Curve. Hello, Jen.
Hello. Excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you. How are you and where are you talking to us from? Where are you based at the moment?
I'm in Oakland, California, in Northern California, near San Francisco.
Oh, very jealous. Wow. We are now today presenting your film to our audience at MiX festivals. We are very proud to screen Ahead of the Curve live in theater during the festival days. And now I have a few questions for you in order to present the film to our audience. So we know the film describes the journey and the life of the lesbian magazine Curve, formerly known as Deneuve. And we know that you are the wife of the founder and editor-in-chief of the magazine, Francis
Yes.
Franco Stevens. So the first question I
Mhm.
have for you is that, but so basically, as we know, you guys are married. So when did the idea of to make the documentary of the history of Cure come to life, and how long did it take for you to shoot it? Also, we know that you shoot this film with co-director Rivka Beth, and so I was wondering when she came on board. Um,
Oh, sure. Yeah. Wow, that's a lot. Okay. So the idea came really in the early years of my marriage to this extraordinary, crazy person, because she would tell me these stories about, going to loan sharks or that time that Catherine Deneuve sued her. Or, the kicker for me was how she got the money to start the magazine. That if you've seen the movie or even the trailer, she couldn't get, nobody would give her any money. So she took out 12 credit cards in one day. She cashed them all out. And then she took the cash and went to the racetrack and bet on the horses and won. And she won 3 times in a row, enough to start the magazine. And I thought, this would make such a fantastic fiction film because nobody would ever believe it. So I started to do the research to write a screenplay. And in doing the research, what I found was that so few of our stories as lesbians have been well documented, certainly from that period of time. I had a hard time finding films, nonfiction films about the women who came before, the women who paved the way for us to have this life that we have now. And it became clear fairly quickly that there was an imperative for me to make this as a documentary film first. I'd never made a film before, narrative or documentary. So I did about a year's worth of work. I pre-interviewed about 70 people from Franco's life, including family and friends and early, people who worked on the magazine and old girlfriends, and it was amazing, and people from the community. And I knew the story that I wanted to tell, but I didn't really know how to. I knew I needed help, and so Rivka and I work together in other capacities, and I knew that she was an accomplished producer. So I asked her if she knew anybody. I didn't think she would want to do it. I asked if she knew anybody who might want to do it, and we were driving actually across the bridge into San Francisco to a party, and she looked at me and she said, "Well, what about this producer? Could I do it? I'd like to do it." And it was perfect. From that point on, she has become, well, we've become business partners now. We started a production company because we loved the experience of making this film so much. We've now got another short documentary that's in post-production and about to be on the festival circuit. And we're working on about 4 other projects. We've written a pilot for an episodic. Anyway, I could talk forever.
Well, thanks. I mean, you just anticipated my other question, which would be, will you be working with Rivka again in the future, being this a positive experience? I know the name of the company you founded is Frankly Speaking, am I right? Which
Yes,
sounds like,
frankly speaking.
I love the name. Yeah, it's a
Thank you.
good name. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
oh yeah, and was Rivka's decision to have you in the film, or was it something that you came together to
I
decide?
was not supposed to be in the film. This was actually, it was supposed to just be a historical piece. We started out just to shoot, to tell the story from about the time that Franco came out or was outed to her family to just after the lawsuit and the magazine name change. And that was it. It was meant to be bounded. And my wife said, I don't want to talk about my disability. I don't want you to even shoot me in the chair. It's not about that. It's about the magazine only. And so that's the story we set out to tell. And after about, we were about 3/4 of the way through shooting. She got the communication from Silke Botter, the then owner of Curve magazine, saying, I'm so sorry to tell you this, Franco, but I can't keep the magazine going any longer. It's too hard. And I need your help to think through what to do next. And that changed everything. That's now the opening scene of the film, and it opened everything up. So now it's sort of the story, it's the historical, but it's also very much what happened next and how what happened in the 90s is continuing to have an impact today. There was another thing that happened that was really profound for me, particularly as Franco's wife, to see her. There was a moment where I was filming her. It's a scene that didn't make it into the film, unfortunately, but she'd just done a podcast for someone telling the story about the magazine. And the podcast ended, and she closed the computer and she looked up at me, and the camera was still running. And she started to cry, and she said, I can't tell you how painful it is that I can no longer run the magazine, that I'm physically unable to do it. And I said, the camera's still on. And she said, yeah, I don't care. It's fine, whatever. And she just needed to talk about it. But she was only going to talk about it with me. She's not a person who gets vulnerable and super open with everybody. So she started to talk. And that's when it became clear that I also needed to be in the film, because she needed somebody to process with. So there I am in the film.
Thank you. Great story. Also, I think that this way to tell the story in the film works quite a lot, because the dialogue in between you two, the fact that you stimulate her, questioning her thought through processes, it works pretty well. Thank you. So now I have a couple of questions about the film itself. So we know that Curve basically gave visibility to lesbians, and we also know that visibility is power. So albeit the magazine wasn't necessarily political in a sense, because it was just showing, talking about the community, talking about lifestyle, talking about lesbian people. Of course, we can fairly say that it was a tool for activism, because it gave pride and power to lesbian women, and calling ourselves as lesbian is still an intrinsically activism act. Since the documentary tells the story of the magazine, would you say that you have made an activist documentary?
Wow. Yes, absolutely. I think it's such a fascinating question, because Franco did not set out to be an activist. She set out to meet a need that she had personally. She needed a publication, a way to connect, a way to understand her community and her potential. And, because she went out and did it, she met the needs of thousands and thousands of women. I did not set out to make an activist film or to be political, but my understanding has evolved in the process of making the film. I came to realize how invisible we are as queer women so much of the time, and how just the simple act of telling our stories, telling them well, telling them loudly, getting them out there in front of audiences, not taking no for an answer, which is actually my wife's personal motto. That's a political act. There are people who find it threatening, just as women, to tell our stories and then to layer on that we're queer. Yeah, it's part of why Rivka and I decided that we want to continue to work together, because we feel so compelled to continue to tell stories that center strong queer women, because it's powerful. It's powerful.
Yeah, also, I guess it's been, and it will be inspiring to many more women. Also, what I really appreciated about the approach of Curve / Deneuve, I don't know how to call it, let's call it Curve, head of the Curve, so, is the fact that from the start, it included all kinds of women. It wouldn't tell the story of just one single faceted woman, who, for how lesbian she would be, she would tell that single story of a, I don't know, white woman in a body shape and blah, blah, blah. So I really appreciated that since the 90s, the diverse, and this is quite well said in the documentary itself. Yeah, she describes very well what she wanted from this magazine to tell. So women of every sort of origin, body shape, market power, job and occupation, and all of that. So my question is, so after this experience, the magazine, and then the magazine of your wife, and then the film that you've made, how can we say, can the lesbian identity still embrace as a word, such a diverse set of people? Does it make sense to speak about a lesbian community, or how this word can open up to embrace all of the diversities that are under the umbrella, if any?
Oh, yes. Yes. I think that's one of the big surprises for me in making this film, is how much we're still struggling with the vocabulary that we use, the words that we use to describe ourselves. I know, well, I mean, gee, when Franco and I were growing up, when we were coming up in the world, there were only two kinds of homosexual identities, I guess. There was gay and there was lesbian. And if you were going to insult, I mean, I got this a lot, actually. People wanted to insult me. They said, "Oh, you're a dyke." And that was an insult. Or, and I know that other people used the word queer as an insult when I was growing up. And I think there's such a power in reclaiming the words. And then there's a thing that happened with the word lesbian also around, and I don't know if this happened around the world, but it certainly happened in the United States, and actually throughout North America, where a very vocal, very unpleasant, and very small faction of lesbians were very dismissive of trans women, or aggressively exclusionary around trans women. And so the word lesbian became tainted a bit from that. So we thought, when we started making the film, we thought that younger people were not using the word lesbian anymore. We thought that it was gone, that we'd lost it. But what we found traveling around North America was that young women are starting to reclaim the word. They're taking it back. The same way I love to identify as dyke now. I find power in it. And I think that's happening with the word lesbian also. It absolutely can be thought of as an inclusive word. I mean, the way that I use it is inclusive. I also think that if someone identifies as queer, it doesn't erase or take away from my own identity. I was thinking about it actually on a walk this morning, but I don't think that the word lesbian is big enough to describe me all the time. Sometimes, some days, sure. Other days, I think I need to use the word queer. It's not quite enough, but I think it's important to have as an identity, to honor and respect the history of the word, and the people who choose to identify that way now. I think it can be inclusive and should be a part of a larger story.